A girl vanished from a locked room, but the cameras never caught how. Detective Jacob Holt slouched in his chair, rubbing his temples as he stared at the case file spread across his desk. The fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the scattered photographs and witness statements. Missing persons cases were the worst, they always left him with a hollow feeling in his gut, a gnawing sense of incompleteness that haunted his dreams. But this one was different. Emma Carter, 22, a bright-eyed psychology student at Columbia University, had vanished from her Upper West Side apartment 3 days ago. The circumstances made his skin crawl, doors locked from the inside, windows sealed, security cameras in the hallway showing no sign of entry or exit. It was as if she'd simply ceased to exist. Holt lifted one of the crime scene photos, studying it for the 100th time. Everything in Emma's studio apartment remained untouched, her phone still charging on the nightstand, wallet tucked neatly in her designer bag, laptop humming on the desk. The screen showed a blank Google search bar, cursor blinking steadily as if waiting for words that would never come. Detective? Officer Sarah Chin appeared in his doorway, dark circles under her eyes matching his own. Building security sent over additional footage. Still nothing unusual, but... She hesitated, fidgeting with the flash drive in her hands. But what? Holt straightened, recognizing the look of someone struggling to rationalize what they'd seen. The timestamp on the hallway camera, it glitches. Just for a second, right around the estimated time of disappearance. Probably just equipment malfunction, but... Holt was already reaching for his coat. I'm heading back to the scene. Something's not right about this one, Chen. I can feel it. The drive to Emma's apartment building was eerily quiet, even for a Tuesday night in Manhattan. As Holt pulled up to the curb, he noticed the security guard watching him through the lobby windows, expression uneasy. The man had been interviewed twice already, but his story never wavered. No one had entered or left Emma's floor during the critical hours. The apartment itself felt different in the darkness. Moonlight filtered through the windows, casting strange shadows across the hardwood floors. Holt moved methodically through the space, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The laptop still sat on the desk, its power light pulsing slowly like a mechanical heartbeat. Something about the webcam caught his attention, a tiny red light, still active. Recording. Holt's breath caught in his throat as he carefully moved the cursor, pulling up the video folder. There, time-stamped from 3 days ago, was a file simply labeled, Help. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked play. Emma's face filled the screen, her usually composed features tight with fear. She sat on the edge of her bed, glancing nervously over her shoulder every few seconds. It started 3 days ago, she began, voice barely above a whisper. I started seeing myself. But not in mirrors or reflections. On screens. In windows. Places where I shouldn't be. She paused, swallowing hard. At first, I thought I was just tired. Studying too much, you know. But then I noticed something wasn't right. The me I was seeing, it wasn't quite in sync. Like watching a delayed broadcast, except. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes wide with terror. Except sometimes it would do things I hadn't done yet. Holt paused the video, his police training warring with what he'd just heard. Mental health issues. Drugs. Sleep deprivation. But something in Emma's eyes spoke of raw, genuine fear. He pressed play again. Today it happened again, Emma continued, her voice growing more frantic. I was studying for my cognitive psychology final, just normal stuff, you know. But when I looked at my laptop screen, I saw my reflection, getting up. Walking to the mirror. Except I was still sitting here. She ran her fingers through her hair, a nervous gesture that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. And then I did get up. I walked to the mirror. It was like following a script I didn't know I was reading. The detective's eyes narrowed as Emma moved to her dresser mirror in the recording. The camera caught her reflection, but something seemed off about the angle, the timing. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. "It's getting closer," Emma whispered, touching the mirror's surface. "The delay, it's shorter now. Like it's catching up to me." She turned back to the camera, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know who to tell. They'll think I'm crazy. Maybe I am crazy. But if you're watching this, if someone finds this, please. Look at the screens. Look at the reflections. Sometimes they show what's about to happen, not what's happening now." The video continued for another 30 seconds, showing Emma sitting silently on her bed, occasionally glancing at her phone screen, her laptop, the mirror. Then the room plunged into darkness. When the image stabilized, she was gone. Holt replayed the last few seconds multiple times, frame by frame. No cuts, no edits. The metadata confirmed it was a continuous recording. One moment Emma was there, the next, nothing. He pulled out his phone, dialing the precinct. "Chen. I need you to pull every surveillance camera feed within a 5-block radius of Emma's apartment. Focus on reflective surfaces, store windows, car mirrors, anything with a screen. And get me everything you can on her background. School records, medical history, family." "Already on it," Chen interrupted. "But there's something else. We found a pattern in her internet search history. Lots of research on quantum mechanics, parallel universes, something called temporal displacement theory. And get this, she was enrolled in an experimental psychology study at Columbia. Something about perception and time." Holt's foot knocked against something under the desk. Bending down, he found a notebook that had slipped behind the trash can. The pages were filled with Emma's increasingly erratic handwriting, diagrams of mirrors facing mirrors, calculations he didn't understand, and one phrase repeated over and over: "The observer effect changes reality." The last page made his blood run cold. In shaky letters, what if we're all just reflections? What if the real us is on the other side, and sometimes the glass gets thin? A flicker of movement caught his eye, his own reflection in Emma's mirror, turning to look behind him. But he hadn't moved. Not yet. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him spin around, heart pounding. Officer Chen stood in the doorway, looking puzzled. "Detective? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Holt tried to steady his breathing. "Chen, what time did you leave the precinct?" "Just now. You called me 5 minutes ago." "No," he said slowly, checking his phone. "I haven't called you yet." Before Chen could respond, Holt's phone rang. The caller ID showed Officer Chen's number. His eyes darted between the Chen standing in the doorway and the phone in his hand. With trembling fingers, he answered the call. "Detective?" Chen's voice came through the speaker. "I've got that surveillance footage you asked for. Should I bring it to Emma's apartment?" The Chen in the doorway hadn't moved her lips. Holt's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. "Stay where you are," he ordered into the phone, keeping his eyes fixed on the figure before him. "I'm heading back to the precinct." The Chen in the doorway smiled, a strange, empty expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Time's funny, isn't it, detective? The way it folds back on itself sometimes." Holt reached for his weapon, but his hand froze halfway. In the mirror behind his visitor, he could see himself already drawing the gun. The movement preceded his intention by a fraction of a second, like a video playing just ahead of its audio track. "What did you do to Emma?" he demanded, fighting the vertigo that threatened to overwhelm him. "Nothing that hasn't already happened. Or hasn't happened yet. It depends on which side you're watching from." The figure that looked like Chen took a step forward, its movement slightly out of sync with its reflection. "She figured it out, you know. The gap between observation and reality. The space where possibility lives. Holt's phone crackled with static. Through it, he could hear Chen's voice from the precinct, growing concerned. "Detective? Are you there? The footage shows something strange." The Chen in the doorway flickered like a bad television signal. Emma saw too much. Started pushing at the edges. When you look too hard at reality, detective, sometimes reality looks back. "Where is she?" Holt's voice was barely a whisper. "Everywhere. Nowhere. She's still in that video you watched, still about to disappear, still disappearing, already gone. Time isn't a line, detective. It's a mirror facing a mirror, reflecting infinitely in both directions." Holt's training kicked in. He forced himself to focus on concrete details, evidence, anything to anchor himself in reality. The temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. The digital clock on Emma's nightstand was running backward. In the laptop screen's reflection, he could see himself turning to run before his body had made the decision. "You're not Chen," he stated flatly, fighting the urge to follow his reflection's movement. "No more than you're you. We're all just reflections, detective. Some of us just realize it sooner than others." The figure's outline began to blur, its edges becoming indistinct. Emma understood. She saw herself in every screen, every window, every mirror, all the possible versions of herself existing simultaneously. Past, present, future, they're all just different angles of the same reflection. A high-pitched whine filled the room, making Holt's teeth ache. The lights flickered, and in each flash, he saw the scene from different angles, himself by the desk, himself in the doorway, himself already running down the hallway. Each version slightly different, slightly out of sync. "Stop," he commanded, but his voice echoed strangely, as if he'd spoken both seconds ago and seconds from now. The Chinthing's smile widened impossibly. "Ask yourself, detective, when you look in a mirror, how do you know which side is really you?" The room plunged into darkness. When Holt's eyes adjusted, he was alone. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Chen, calls that hadn't happened yet. The laptop screen reflected his face, but the expression it wore wasn't his. Not quite. Not yet. Holt stumbled out of the apartment, his mind racing to rationalize what he'd witnessed. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, its walls lined with mirrors that the building's designer had thought would make the space feel larger. Now each reflection seemed to tell a different story, Holt walking away, Holt standing still, Holt turning back toward Emma's door. He pulled out his phone again, checking the call log. The 3 missed calls from Chen had vanished. Instead, there was an incoming text from an unknown number: "Ask Dr. Harrison about Project Morpheus." The elevator ride to the lobby felt like an eternity. Holt used the time to run background checks through the police database. Dr. James Harrison, Columbia University. Department of Quantum Physics and Experimental Psychology. Current status: deceased. Cause of death: suicide, 6 months ago. Last known project: classified. The security guard looked up as Holt approached the front desk. "Everything all right, detective? You look like you've seen a ghost." "The security footage from 3 days ago," Holt said, ignoring the eerie familiarity of the phrase. "I need to see it again." The guard, Williams, according to his nameplate, shifted uncomfortably. "Funny thing about that. System crashed about an hour ago. Lost everything from the past week. Tech guys can't explain it." Of course they couldn't. Holt fought down a wave of frustration. "What about the backup servers?" "That's the weird part." Williams leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They're saying the data's still there, but it's wrong. Like the timestamps don't match up. Same footage playing at different speeds, events out of order. They're bringing in specialists tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word echoed strangely in Holt's mind. "Show me. Now." The security office was cramped, walls lined with monitors showing live feeds from throughout the building. Williams pulled up the archived footage on the main screen. The timestamp read 72 hours ago, but something was off about the image quality. It seemed to shift and waver, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. "There's Emma," Williams pointed. The young woman appeared on screen, entering her apartment. The same time index showed her leaving. Then entering again. The footage looped, but each iteration was slightly different. Sometimes she carried books, sometimes a coffee cup, sometimes nothing at all. "That's impossible," Williams muttered. "It's like we're seeing multiple versions at once," Holt finished. "All the possibilities playing out simultaneously." A movement on one of the live feed monitors caught his attention. Emma's door was opening. But when he turned to look at the hallway through the office window, the door remained closed. "Call for backup," Holt ordered, already moving toward the elevator. "And whatever you do, don't look too long at the screens." The ride back up to Emma's floor felt different this time. The elevator's mirrored walls showed reflections that moved independently, each one a fraction of a second ahead or behind Holt's actual movements. He kept his eyes fixed on the numbered display, watching as it counted up to 7, then down to 3, then up again, as if the elevator itself couldn't decide which direction time was flowing. When the doors opened, Emma was standing in the hallway. Not the Emma from the case file photos, this version was older, her hair streaked with gray, face lined with years that hadn't happened yet. She held up a hand as Holt reached for his gun. "Detective," she said, her voice carrying echoes of both youth and age. "I've been waiting for you. Or I will be. It's hard to keep track these days." Holt's police training warred with the impossible scene before him. "Emma Carter?" "Yes." "No." "Both." She glanced at her reflection in the hallway mirror, then quickly away. "We don't have much time. The barriers are getting thinner." "What barriers?" "Between the possibilities. Between what is and what could be." She moved closer, her movements jerky and unnatural, like a video playing at the wrong speed. Dr. Harrison understood. He built machines to measure it, the lag between observation and reality. But he never meant to break it. "Break what?" Holt fought to keep his voice steady. "The present moment. The now." Emma's form flickered, momentarily showing her younger self before settling back into the older version. "Time isn't linear, detective. It's more like a stack of transparencies, all laying on top of each other. Usually, we only see one layer at a time. But sometimes, if you know how to look." A noise from the stairwell interrupted her. Officer Chen, the real Chen, burst through the door, weapon drawn. "Detective! Don't move." "Sarah, wait," Holt started, but it was too late. The hallway erupted into chaos. In the mirrors, Holt saw dozens of versions of the scene playing out simultaneously. In one reflection, Chen fired her weapon. In another, she lowered it. In a third, she was never there at all. The versions multiplied in the mirrors like an infinite regression, each one slightly different, all happening at once. "It's collapsing," Emma said urgently. "Too many observers, too many possibilities converging. We have to." Her words cut off as the lights flickered. In the strobing effect, Holt saw Emma at different ages, a child, a teenager, an elderly woman, all occupying the same space, all equally real and unreal. "The lab," she managed to say, her voice overlapping with itself. "Harrison's lab. The machine is still." The hallway plunged into darkness. When the emergency lights came on seconds later, Emma was gone. But Chen was still there, staring at Holt with wide eyes. "Did you?" she began. "See that?" "Yeah." Holt ran a hand through his hair. "Check the body cam footage." Chen pulled out her phone, accessing the live feed from her body camera. The screen showed the empty hallway, no Emma, no temporal distortions, just Holt standing alone by the elevator. "Detective," Chen said slowly, "what's happening?" Before Holt could answer, his phone buzzed. A text message from Emma's number, Columbia University, Quantum Research Lab B, 48 hours ago. Or maybe tomorrow. Time is negotiable. Chen read the message over his shoulder. That's impossible. We have her phone in evidence. Nothing's impossible anymore. Holt was already moving toward the stairs. Call the precinct. Get them to pull everything they can find on Dr. Harrison's research. And Chen. Yeah. Don't trust anything you see in the mirrors. The drive to Columbia took 20 minutes that somehow lasted both seconds and hours. The campus was quiet, most students gone for the night. The physics building loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like a wall of screens. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at Holt's badge before buzzing them through. "Quantum labs are in the basement," he said, his voice oddly distant. "Dr. Harrison's old space is B7. But no one's been down there since." He trailed off, his reflection in the security desk's glass continuing the sentence silently, mouth moving without sound. The elevator wouldn't respond to the basement button, so Holt and Chen took the stairs. Each step down seemed to take them further from normal reality. The air grew thick, heavy with the hum of machinery that shouldn't be running in an abandoned lab. "Detective," Chen whispered as they reached the basement level, "my watch is running backward." Holt checked his phone. The screen showed 3 different times simultaneously, the digits overlapping like a multiple exposure photograph. "Stay close." The hallway stretched out before them, lined with dark laboratories behind glass walls. Their reflections walked alongside them, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, like a desynchronized dance troupe. Room B7 was at the end, its door slightly ajar. Blue light pulsed from within, casting long shadows that moved independently of their sources. The lab was a maze of mirrors and screens, all arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. On every surface, images flickered and shifted, Emma at different ages, Dr. Harrison working at his desk, Holt and Chen entering the room. Past, present, and future bleeding together. "Look." Chen pointed to a notebook on the nearest desk. The pages were filled with equations and diagrams, the handwriting switching between Harrison's and Emma's with each line. The last entry read, "The observer effect doesn't just measure reality, it creates it." But what happens when the observations contradict each other? A familiar voice echoed through the lab, "They splice and overlap, like waves interfering with each other." Emma, the young Emma from the case file, stepped out from behind a bank of monitors. Her image reflected in every screen and mirror, each version slightly different, creating a kaleidoscope of possibilities. "Time isn't breaking," she continued. "It's resolving itself. Like a quantum state collapsing under observation. Too many observers, too many versions, all trying to exist at once. How do we fix it?" Holt asked, noticing that his voice seemed to reach Emma before he spoke. "Fix it?" She laughed, the sound bouncing off the mirrors in overlapping echoes. "You still think in such linear terms, detective. There's nothing to fix. This is how reality always was, we just couldn't see it before. Dr. Harrison built this machine to measure the lag between observation and event, but he discovered something else. The lag isn't a flaw in our perception. It's a window. A window to what? To everything. Every possibility, every choice, every version of ourselves." Emma moved to the central platform, her movements leaving trailing afterimages in the air. When you look in a mirror, there's a millisecond delay between action and reflection. In that gap, all possibilities exist simultaneously. Dr. Harrison found a way to widen that gap. But he couldn't handle seeing all the versions of himself at once. That's why he Committed suicide, Chen finished. Or did he? Depends on which version you're asking about. Emma smiled sadly. In some reflections, he's still alive. In others, he never existed at all. Reality is more fragile than we thought, more negotiable. Holt took a step toward the platform. Come with us, Emma. We can help. I'm already with you, detective. I'm also at home, studying for finals. I'm graduating next week. I'm retiring after a long career. I'm being born. Her form began to blur at the edges. The only question is, which version will you choose to observe? The machines around them hummed louder, screens flickering faster. In each reflection, the scene played out differently. Holt saw himself arresting Emma, helping her escape, leaving empty-handed, never arriving at all. Each version equally real, equally valid. Make a choice, detective, Emma's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. But remember, just because you choose to observe one version of reality doesn't mean the others cease to exist. They're all still there, playing out in the spaces between seconds, in the gaps between what is and what could be. The blue light pulsed one final time, bright enough to blind. When Holt's vision cleared, the lab was empty. The machines were silent, covered in dust as if they hadn't run in months. No signs of Emma, no temporal distortions, just an abandoned research space. Chen's body cam would later show nothing unusual, just two officers searching an empty lab. The security footage from Emma's apartment building was corrupted beyond recovery. Her laptop contained no video files. But sometimes, late at night, when Holt reviews the case file that officially remains open, he catches movement in his computer screen's reflection. A young woman, sitting at a desk, about to make a discovery that will break the barriers between what is and what could be. And in that moment before he turns to look, all possibilities exist at once. The case of Emma Carter was never solved, or perhaps it was solved too many times, each solution existing simultaneously in the quantum space between observation and reality. The official report remains incomplete, a footnote in the precinct's unsolved cases. But Holt knows better than to trust official reports these days. After all, they can only tell one version of the story. And sometimes, when he looks in mirrors, he sees Emma Carter living out all her possible lives, each one as real as the last. He's learned not to look too long, not to question which reflection is truly real. Because in the end, maybe they all are.